everyone. Welcome to another podcast for Voices of OS. Today we have with us Tommy Wiaduck, who is going to talk to us a little bit about what he has been up to.
Thanks for joining us, Tommy.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
We're so excited to have you too. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself before we get started with some more questions?
Yeah, of course, happy to. So my name's Tommy. I am a current senior in the Organizational Studies program. My pathway is focused on education, but I also have majors in Spanish and linguistics. So my pathway kind of combines all those together, and I'm really passionate and hope to work in the future towards education reform in U.S. public schools, specifically related to people who, might be second language learners of English, or, come from backgrounds or, different experiences where they might need extra linguistic support in the classroom. Outside of that, I consider myself a super creative person. I like to write a lot in my free time. I love to travel. I've studied abroad before in Spain, and I'll be headed back to Spain next year to teach English for a gap year before hopefully coming back to the States and pursuing graduate school somewhere in the intersection of education and linguistics.
That travel sounds incredible. When does the opportunity start teaching abroad?
Yeah, so I'll be moving to Madrid, and their school year starts a little bit later than what we're used to in the States. So it starts in October. So I'll be moving in kind of early to middle of September. So I have some time to settle in and get oriented before jumping into the classroom there.
That is so exciting.
I know, I'm super pumped.
Okay, thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself, Tommy. With that, we can actually head into our first question for today, which is, what is one aspect of your identity or one life experience that has greatly influenced who you are today?
Yeah, of course. So the first thing that comes to my mind with this question, I think kind of combines both identity and experience. Just as a little background, I am from Michigan. I went to high school in Novi, Michigan, and it was an all-boys Catholic college preparatory high school. Coming from the town that I grew up in, it was very much kind of like an all-white community, and my high school was also a predominantly white high school. And, majority of the students there were upper middle class, as well as, very religious or Catholic in some sense. There wasn't a lot of, kind of like diversity that I saw between my peers in my classrooms there, in the curriculum there, or even with the teachers in my school. Don't get me wrong, I had a great experience in the school for the most part. I really kind of fell in love with learning there, and I'm very thankful for that. But then transitioning from high school, kind of in that very much sheltered and religious environment, and coming to Michigan, I was expecting to just be thrown into this whole new world with, thousands and thousands of people around me. And I was kind of shocked to find out that, here I am at Michigan again at a predominantly white institution. And having grown up the way that I did, I really had to kind of pressure and challenge myself, I guess, to, find and seek out new spaces, meet new types of people, have new experiences, because I felt very unsatisfied with kind of the repetition of, both the social and academic environments that I kept finding myself in naturally. So in that sense, I feel kind of like having that motivation and having those past experiences has really allowed me to grow into, a more fuller and better version of myself. I feel like I have a much better understanding, and, still, of course, acknowledging that I'm still always learning and still always growing, still always meeting new people and having new experiences. But I'm very just kind of thankful for all the growth that I've seen, especially in the past 4 years, as I've been able to kind of like explore, the spaces and people and communities on campus, as well as learn a lot more, about myself. Having been in that high school experience that I had just mentioned, it was very difficult for me to, come to terms a lot with my social identity of my sexual orientation. And, I identify as a gay man, and that was something that was really difficult for me, being in a religious environment. And coming to the University of Michigan, I thought would kind of also instantly fix that for me, as I, was in this non-religious environment and had the opportunity to find myself in these new spaces. But it didn't really happen naturally, and I had to really, be purposeful in kind of working through that. And I'm just very grateful for, over the past 4 years on campus, finding, communities of students and, academic communities as well, where I've been able to kind of like become more comfortable with who I am, see myself reflected in the things that I do, both inside and outside of the classroom.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tommy. I think it's really amazing how much we can grow in 4 years in college. Looking back on ourselves, day one, stepping foot to almost graduating in a couple weeks.
Exactly. It's creeping up fast and definitely making me start to think and reflect a lot more about everything that's happened in the past 8 semesters.
Absolutely. For our next question, we are wondering what inspires or motivates you?
Ooh, this is tough because I feel like a lot of my inspirations, my motivations change from even week to week. But I think the first thing that comes to mind that I'll say first is, my parents, they have always been my rock, especially my mom. Will be the first to admit that I'm a huge mama's boy. She inspires me every day, just like she's one of the most compassionate, kind, and loving people that I know. And, being away from her, even though I live close to home, but being on a college campus has been, of course, difficult. Everyone probably feels like they miss people back home in some way, shape, or form. But I feel like everything I do, whenever I accomplish something, the first thing I think about is like my mom and just like being able to share and, that kind of pride. Um, when I was little, she was so involved in like my education and my schooling and things like that. And she's kind of been there for me every step of the way. And I'm so grateful for that support. But then on a much larger scale and a less kind of personal scale, and I think I might have mentioned this earlier when talking about myself a little bit, but I am super, super passionate about education. I always have been. I've been wanted to be a teacher for, the longest time since I was little. And although I'm not sure if I'll be, working directly in a classroom for the rest of my life, one of the things that I just kind of like always think about when I think of, where do I want to be 5, 10, 15 years from now is I want to, really just be changing students' lives either directly or indirectly, whether that be on kind of like a larger broader policy level, or working in school-based organizations or districts, or even working on the back end on things like curriculum to help students feel more heard and seen in the classroom, especially in schools and areas of the country and the world, I guess I should say, that are unfortunately under resourced. And I don't know, that just inspires me a lot. I feel like there's just so much so much progress to be made, for, all the years to come. And I am excited and motivated to hopefully be a part of that someday.
I think it really is interesting to see how like our past experiences kind of manifest into our future aspirations and how you don't even realize it at the time. So that was really interesting. For our next question, we have what factors have influenced your pathway in OS and what you aspire to do in the future?
Ooh, of course. All right. So for a little bit of context, when I applied to OS as a sophomore, probably like a lot of prospective or current OS students, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. As I mentioned before, I had always wanted to be a teacher. It was always on my radar, but I also wanted to keep my options open at the same time. So I applied to OS, thinking I would go in with just an education pathway of some way, shape, or form. I acknowledged I'd have a lot of time to, figure out the details of that. But, kind of somewhere along the way, I ended up accidentally falling into the discipline of linguistics and also Spanish. I had my study abroad experience in Spain, and I ended up adding, a linguistics concentration and taking a bunch of linguistics courses during the pandemic and especially during my junior year. And I'd say that those courses and kind of having, the interdisciplinary flexibility that OS offers really allowed me to combine linguistics into my pre-existing education pathway in organizational studies. If you would have asked me 2 years ago or even a year and a half ago, like, could you ever see linguistics involved in an org studies pathway, I probably wouldn't have been able to answer you. But I'm just super excited now because I've been able to learn so much in the classroom, all the way from core and more traditional linguistics topics to kind of more current and popular realms of the field like sociolinguistics and educational linguistics, and just constantly being able to draw themes between all the classes that I take all over campus and completely seemingly unrelated departments and programs has just been really exciting for me, because it's made me feel like OS really did allow me to find a space where, I can create my own unique path of study that's specific to me, my passions, my interests, and where I hope to be and what I hope to do in the future. So definitely, and if anyone's listening and wants some advice, I would say definitely try new things, explore as much as you can on campus. The time will fly by, and you only have so many opportunities to take all the cool classes or classes you just never expected to take, because you never know how much they're really going to speak to you, or what kind of paths or journeys they'll provide for you in the future, or doors they'll open for you as you continue growing and learning and moving forward in your undergraduate experience.
Totally. That's the best advice. And we're so lucky in OS that we can have opportunities in multiple disciplines and, like you said, have a pathway that evolves over time. I know my pathway too, when I was joining as a junior, is now very different than it is as a senior. And it's amazing what themes and patterns come up in ways that, or areas are connected in ways that you didn't even realize before learning. So
Of course,
thank
yeah.
you.
Retweet to that.
Yeah, retweet. We do have one more question for you, and you already touched on this, a little bit of advice about college, but is there any other piece of advice that someone else has given you that you'd like to pass on and share with any listeners?
So the piece of advice I think that comes to mind first that I'd like to share actually comes from our wonderful OS major advisor, Kathy Philbin, who's the best. And for context, I really struggle with making decisions. It could be something super trivial, like what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, or something, much bigger, like what grad school program am I going to apply to? What, am I going to do for my gap year? Things that might more severely impact, the trajectory of my life and my journey. And the advice she basically gave me was, for as long as you can, keep as many doors as possible open. And the way I kind of interpret that is, I often get in my head, and I'm a big planner. I'm always thinking of the future, what's next. And I think of all these decisions I'm going to have to make, and I kind of trace them down like a tree and think of what decision do I need to make now that's going to help me get there. And what helped me realize was that when I was doing that, a decision I make now on maybe, a class I'm going to take, or a summer experience I'm going to have, I was putting too much pressure on those decisions, in the sense of like how the decision I'm making now was going to open or close doors that I had later on. And she basically told me, go step by step, and she calls them decision points. Once you get to a specific decision point, just that one decision you have to make in the moment, obviously you will have to decide right then and there what to do, but don't let that, limit kind of like your thinking of what is going to go on in the future. So try and just focus on the here and the now, live in the present a little bit, and make the best decision that you can. And obviously, when you're doing that, be sure to reach out to, your mentors, your friends, your family, people who you trust and who inspire you. And, as you're kind of waiting to get to decision points, another piece of bonus advice that I could give you, that comes from one of my research mentors on campus. His name is Dr. Lorenzo Garcia Maya. He's in the Romance Languages and Literatures department as a Spanish professor, a Spanish linguistics professor. But he always encourages me to seek out situations that where you find yourself surrounded by people who are better than you. People, always surround yourself with people who have something to teach you. If you're obviously the one, teaching other people, that's great as well. You can learn a lot from that. But if you have the choice to be, the best in the group or the worst in the group, he would say, or I would at least interpret that as, be the worst in the group every time, so you can learn as much from the people around you, and surround yourself with people who can help you get to, the decision points you need to do, and give you the best advice and insight when you make those decisions.
I love all of that advice, and Kathy is so, so wise. I think anyone who's graduating soon can keep that in mind, as we're getting to a lot of these decision points, that we don't need to have our entire lives figured out right now, and that many, many more doors will be opening ahead based on the doors that are open now. So I am so excited to see what you accomplish, Tommy. I know it's going to be great things. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your advice with us, to share a little bit about yourself. I know you're an integral part of our cohort and an inspiration to so many other people in org studies. So thank you for being you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I love organizational studies. I love being involved on the student leadership team. And I'm really excited that you all are creating this podcast and this experience to kind of share out with the broader community. So keep up the good work as well.
Thanks so much again, Tommy. Your perspective was so insightful, and I'm sure a lot of future OS students and even current OS students will find it very valuable to listen to your experiences, and hopefully that will help them out as well in the future.